Rescue and rehome. This is what most people think of when they think of the function of animal shelters. In the traditional rescue and rehome model, vulnerable animals are taken in from the community into the shelter, where they're cared for until they can find new homes. Now this sounds really good on paper, but there can be unintended consequences with strict adherence to this rescue and rehome model. For example, people who are looking at surrendering their animals are often vilified and characterised as uncaring or irresponsible, without due regard for the very real circumstances people can face in changing life circumstances. It is important to remember that the well-being of animals depends on the well-being of their human caretakers. We know from robust studies that areas with greater social deprivation also have higher risks of surrenders, and it's important that we support communities. A one welfare approach to animal sheltering explicitly acknowledges the inescapable connectedness between animal welfare, human well-being, and the environment. But wait, I'm getting really abstract here, and so what I want you to do is stop for a minute and imagine a fictional woman, Rebecca, and her dog, Buddy. Now, Rebecca's had Buddy since he was a little puppy. They have been through thick and thin together. While times have been tough sometimes, she's made sure to get him fully vaccinated, and he's well socialized because basically they do everything together. With the COVID pandemic, Rebecca lost her job. So her and Buddy are temporarily couch surfing, sleeping on friends' sofas until she can find a new job. And then it happens. Buddy requires urgent medical care, and Rebecca cannot afford it. So she's faced with this horrifying decision. To get Buddy the care he needs, she has to consider surrendering her best friend. Now, this is not an isolated story. Many of us are just one job loss, one illness, one accident, one pandemic away from not being able to afford a large veterinary bill. And this comes with consequences. So we know that most people, poverty, illness, and short-term emergencies in combination with a lack of accessible and affordable pet care, pet-friendly housing, and behaviour support can all combine to cause even the most devoted owner to have to consider surrendering their pet. We know that people don't make this decision lightly. In fact, 75% of people who do surrender their animals do so due to lack of accessible resources or lack of pet-friendly accommodation. And when made aware of support services, many people want to explore these to find a way to keep their pet. Now, let's go back to Rebecca and Buddy and see how they're faring with the rescue and rehome model. Now, Buddy has tried. Rebecca has tried. She's been around friends and family, but she can't afford it. And so reluctantly, she takes Buddy to the shelter and surrenders him. And she leaves that shelter that day for the first time without her best friend. And as for Buddy, well, he remains in the shelter, and he does get his medical care he needs. But now he has to wait in the shelter for a new home to be found. And for an adult dog, he could be waiting for a long time. Unfortunately, even the best run shelter is an inherently stressful environment for animals. Buddy's exposed to strange smells, strange sounds, strange people, unfamiliar animals, and an unpredictable routine. And all of these stressors combine to mean that coming into the shelter is not always in an animal's best interest. Now, I want to be very clear here. There is always going to be a place for the shelter to act as this safety net for those animals who require specialist and urgent behavioural support and veterinary care. But in many cases, there may be opportunities to intervene earlier. Where an animal already has a loving home, it is often in that animal's best interest for us to provide short-term support to keep them in that home. Increasingly, globally, we have seen shelters moving away from a rescue way of thinking and away from the idea that we are saving animals by bringing them into the shelter. Instead, shelters are looking towards each individual animal to understand what would be the best outcome for that animal and providing services to support them to get there. And in some cases, that may be providing support to keep them with their owner. In this new community sheltering model, the community becomes the heart of the shelter. The physical shelter continues to be able to provide emergency care for those animals in need, but we expand support services to provide a safety net that keeps pets and people together. In this model, surrender becomes a last resort, and fostering becomes the preferred housing option to keep animals out of the shelter. So what does this look like? Well, there are different solutions for different problems. As we said, we want to find the right solution for the problem. We know that many animals are surrendered due to a short-term lack of funding. Now, many shelters offer pet pantries. These provide essential day-to-day care items such as food, cat litter, flea and worm treatments, bedding, and housing. Shelters can also provide support by establishing stay-together funds, which can be used for creative solutions to keep animals in their homes, such as fence building or catio materials. Behaviour problems are another common reason why animals end up in the shelter. It can be hard for owners to find reliable, reputable sources of information for dealing with problem behaviours. Yes, there is a lot of information out there, but there is even more misinformation, and taking the wrong approach can actually often make problems worse. This is why pre-surrender counselling and behaviour support is so important. It not only helps that animals stay out of the shelter, but it goes on to upskill people to prevent future cases. We also know that many owners, many people, will struggle at some point in their life to access or afford veterinary care. In fact, 80% of people would struggle to afford a large unexpected veterinary bill, and 10% of people struggle to afford basic preventative health care. This includes things like desexing, microchipping, and vaccination. And desexing is particularly important because this prevents the creation of unwanted litters who feed into that shelter system. It is often better for animal welfare and actually more cost-effective to provide short-term, fee-waived or fee-reduced veterinary services. Cost and transport are these big issues for people. Transport is a tricky one, so it's important that shelters remain mobile to provide communities with services instead of expecting communities to come to them. There are a number of ways that shelters can provide support to their communities. This includes low-cost desexing options such as snip and chip. It can include mobile veterinary clinics such as the desexing caravan that last year toured Northland, taking to that area much needed resources and preventative health care. Restrictions on rental properties and on retirement villages are also another avenue through which animals enter the sheltering system. Many people cite changes in living situations or working conditions as a reason for surrender, and there are ways we can provide support. We can advocate for pet-friendly communities, which includes transport and pet-friendly workplaces. We can provide downloadable pet CVs, so people can make a case and show their animal, so they get a better chance of finding a home together. We can also provide referrals to human support services and pet-friendly accommodation options to keep pets and their people together. Fostering can be used for animals to wait out their stray hold time, quarantine, and their wait for a new home. In fact, in some cases, that foster home may become their new home, as I can personally attest to. Greater utilization of fostering means that we can reduce the number of days an animal spends in the shelter, which in turn reduces shelter costs. This also has the benefit of the animal remaining in a home environment where they're less likely to experience deterioration in behaviour or physical health. It also means that we've increased the capacity of the shelter to help those animals who truly need that specialised care. It also means that we are reducing the risk that these animals might bring disease into that vulnerable shelter population, or indeed become diseased themselves, which can increase length of stay. Finder foster, which is where the person who finds the animal is supported to provide short-term care for an animal until their owner can be found, or they can move into shelter care, is a great way of not only providing care for that animal, but also recruiting new fosterers. Foster ambassadors are foster carers who advertise their animal and promote them to find them a new home. We noticed that through the COVID pandemic, many shelters moved to a 100% foster model, where all the animals were moved out of the physical centre and into the community. Now many shelters, including in New Zealand, have adopted a hybrid model, but there's still high reliance on foster care. That means that animals are advertised through online advertisements, and trial adoptions can be used to make sure animals are a good fit for that family. We also find with moving animals out of the centre that the centre is now closed for public viewing of adoptable animals. This is for two reasons. One, because they're mostly in foster. And two, because now that centre is focused on dealing with these animals who come from really difficult backgrounds and need a stable, quiet, controlled environment, and staff who are focused on their needs rather than showing people around or managing kids on a busy Saturday. We can also provide support of community rehoming. This is where the centre provides support to existing owners to find a new home, so that the animal can move from its current home to its new home without a stay in the shelter. This can include things like templates or advice guides. It could be advertising portals, or it could be things like a pre-rehoming health check, D-sex, vaccination, and microchipping. On back. So in all of this, we need the shelter still to be that important place for those animals who require specialist or urgent behavioural support or medical care. But by pivoting this model and prioritising community support services, we can keep many animals out of the shelter. And this can free up resources for essential preventative care, like national targeted desexing, so we can break this cycle. We can also, through adopting a community sheltering approach, give a happier ending to people like Rebecca and dogs like Buddy. Now, I've talked a lot through this about how shelters can help the communities, but this is a community approach, and that means it includes you. So there are so many ways in which you can help your community. You can donate to local pet pantries. You can foster, I highly recommend it. If you are a landlord, you could consider pets negotiable. Perhaps you could look for people to provide a pet CV. You could even allow tenants to just dip their toes in the water by exploring fostering. The same goes for retirement villages. We know that people who live there have a lot to give. They have time and care. And this is a great way of providing a temporary home to animals in need until they reach their forever home. You can even become a pet detective, scouring the pages of lost and found pets to reunite pets with their owners so that they don't have to enter the shelter system. But look, if you're going to do one thing, and one thing only, make it this. Be compassionate. And not just to animals, but to people too. Thank you.